Well, today I thought I'd do something different, and so I'm going to have a conversation with Hannah today, and you get to listen. Hello, Hannah. You know, every Mother's Day I try to think of something unique to do, and it gets hard after a while when you've been doing this as long as I have. And Melissa mentioned you on the front porch, and I thought, okay, I'll talk about Hannah. I'll talk to you today. Oh, what's Mother's Day? You never saw one of those, did you? Well, it's a chance to sell a lot of flowers, I'll tell you that. And the restaurant's going to be full today. And Mother's Day is kind of hard sometimes for some that missed their moms, or some that didn't have a good mom, some that missed their wives. And so sometimes it's hard, but it's a time to honor people, Hannah. And we honor you today. And you know, I imagine you never thought that 3,000 years after you passed that we'd still be talking about you. You probably never even thought you were going to be in God's book either. But in what we call 1st and 2nd Samuel, named after your boy, you're the hero of the first two chapters. You set the stage. You're the heroine. You're front stage right there. And there's got to be a reason God did that for us. There you are. And you know, Hannah, your culture was so different than ours. Your time, a woman's value was really giving a man kids so they could take on his legacy, and they could take over his farm or his vineyard or whatever it was that they had. And that's kind of how you found love. Kind of harsh, but we're not quite that bad today. But you know, Hannah, it seems like sometimes people have holes in their heart, and they're hard to fill. And I've been telling people for a long time, Hannah, that in all of us, there's a God-sized hole. And the only thing that'll fit in there is God. And if you try to put anything else in there, it's just going to burn you up. But in life, in our relationships, it seems like there's just sometimes needs that only one thing fulfills. And for you, you wanted a child. And you wanted a son. God had put it in your DNA that you wanted a son. And you were married to Elkanah. And Elkanah, he didn't put any pressure on you. It wasn't like the other stories, was it? What? Yeah. He loved you, didn't he? He just wanted you to be content. That's all he wanted. He loved you unconditionally. He didn't demand any kids from you. He just wanted you to relax and enjoy life. But what? Yeah, I know what he said. Yeah. He said that why couldn't he be as good as 10 boys? Oh, what the ache in a man's heart when he just said, can I count? Count my love? Count for a kid? And I understand that, and us guys understand that, because, you know, Hannah, the child of my old age is leaving now. And I'm finally going to have empty nest. And I think quite often, am I going to be enough? Can I be that? And Hannah, I know what you didn't say to him. You couldn't, because you can't explain it. What you didn't say is, Elkanah, I love you with all my heart, but you can't ever be a son. He can't ever be a husband. And he understood, and he was a man way before his time, and he understood that love is giving, love is not receiving. And he just loved you that way, and he saw your wound, didn't he? He saw your heartbreak and your bleeding soul, and he wanted so bad to help. But he didn't have the answer. And then you had Peninnah there. Peninnah was your husband Elkanah's other wife. Peninnah. Where did y'all get these names? I mean, you got Elkanah, Peninnah, you're going to have Hophni, and all these names coming up. I mean, mercy. Hannah, y'all didn't think about me having to do this sermon when y'all came up with all those names. Wow. And polygamy, I don't get that. I can't handle one wife. I don't know what I'd do with two. What a mess that is. And Peninnah's got little kids running around, and she's kind of mean-spirited, which means there's a good chance her kids are mean-spirited. And so I assume that you just listen to that stuff all the time. And what a sad situation, Hannah. She had his kids, and he didn't love her. And he loved you, but you didn't have his kids. And so I'm thinking that 3,000 years ago, you were a really prime example of a dysfunctional family. And that's okay, because you know what? Most of us sitting here right now, we got dysfunctional families too. We just don't talk about it a whole lot. And what a story, Hannah. Yeah, I know. You had to go to the tabernacle every year because Elkanah wanted to go offer a sacrifice, and you went every year. And your husband thought he was being a nice guy, and he'd give a portion of sacrifice and a portion of meat to everybody in the family, and he'd give you a double portion. I know, understand. He was trying to be nice and make up for you not having kids. But boy, Penina didn't like that. She saw that, and every year she just tortured you. Every year y'all went to worship, she just egg you on, and she'd make fun of you because you can't have kids, and she'd brag about her kids and talk about how much better they were and how good they were. You're never going to have kids, and she'd tell you that Elkanah really doesn't love you because you haven't given him a son, and she'd just roast you. And it had to be so hard year after year after year. You know, Hannah, some of us experience that too. We have family reunions, that's what we call them. And our crazy aunts always come, and they have the same fight over and over and over and mess everything up. And that's what Penina did to you all the time, isn't it? Huh? Oh. I know. You don't have to remind me. She was just hurting too. That's your soul, isn't it, Hannah? You found no need to say anything back. You found no need to argue. You found no need to hurt her. Because in your graceful, loving spirit, you understood she's just broken. But oh, you had choices. I mean, Hannah, you could have said to Elkanah, I'm not going home with that woman. Or you could have said, I'm not sharing a meal with her. Or you could have said, get his rugrats out of my house. Or you could have said, it's her or me. And he probably would have picked you and taken his boys with him. Penina had nowhere to go. But instead, at a meal when your heart just couldn't take any more, when the burden was so incredible, you just stood up and you started praying. You stood up right there. You didn't hit your knees. You didn't go over and lay on your face. You stood up and you started praying out loud, or praying to yourself, but weeping out loud. And you're standing there and you're sobbing. And we call that snot slinging crying. And that's what you were doing. You're just breaking down and weeping and wailing. And it was coming from somewhere deep in your spirit. And your mouth was moving, but nothing was coming out. And old Eli, the prophet, saw you. What'd he say? Yeah. He thought you were drunk, didn't he? He said, you know, you've had enough wine. You probably ought to put her up. Oh, Hannah, us preachers, we miss it really bad sometimes. But when he heard what you were doing and why you were crying and why you were praying so hard, he blessed you, didn't he? He blessed you and said you were going to have that son. And not only that, for years to come, every time you show up, he blesses you again. You ended up with 3 more boys after Samuel and 2 more girls. And I'm going to imagine old Elkanah told Eli, you can quit blessing her now. That's enough of that. You know, Hannah, what's amazing about you as a mother is you just knew that's who you were born to be, and you just stormed. You marched right into the Holy of Holies and had a conversation with God, and you and God came to an agreement. He's going to loan you a boy, and then you're going to loan him back to God. And you didn't give him for just a little bit. You didn't give him till a priest retires at 52 or whatever that is. What you did was you gave him for life, because you said, Hannah, no razor would ever touch his head. You gave him to God forever. And then you brought him back to the tabernacle, and you gave him back to Eli. Not Hophni and Phinehas, his crazy boys. That's a story for another day. Those boys were a piece of work. You gave him back to Eli. But what I love about it is, and here's something you teach me, Hannah, is your word created a world. You spoke your son into existence in cooperation with God. And our words create worlds, Hannah. We've learned that if you speak wickedness, you're going to create a wicked world. If you speak peace, you're going to create with your words a peaceful world. If you speak love, you're going to create a world of love. If you speak hatred, you're going to create an entire environment of hatred. And you taught us that. Because what we learned from you, Hanna, is so important that God doesn't give you a heart without giving you the help. He gave you the heart for what you wanted to do, and He gave you the help on how to achieve it. And it did all this before you were even conceived, but you went home, and before long you're pregnant. And then every year Elkanah kept going back to that tabernacle and going to sacrifice. You didn't go, though. You said, not going until this boy's weaned. When he was weaned, you took him, and you gave him to Eli. Now, you know, because you've been with Samuel now for 3,000 years and Elkanah up there in heaven, you know it all worked out all right. But we hear that story and think, 3 years old? You're going to take him to a man at 3 years old and leave him there. Well, that was arranged before conception. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Wise mothers know that their sons never were theirs. Wise mothers know their kids never did belong to them. And she leaves that boy, and the last verse says, right there in chapter 1 and going into chapter 2, that when she leaves, it says, he worshiped the Lord there. Now that might mean future, that's what ended up happening, but that's not the tense it's written in. What that means is, when she's leaving, that 3-year-old boy is worshiping the Lord. Well, where did he learn that? From his mama. You never did forget, though, did you, Hanna? You still got that mama at heart, even though you got 5 more. Every time you came to the tabernacle from then on, what'd you do? Yeah, you brought him a little robe. Because you know men can't dress nobody. I mean, Eli just can't do that. You know, you got to give this boy something that looks a little bit acceptable because he's still your son. And so you kept bringing that. And then when you left, in chapter 2, what we call chapter 2, I know you don't know what chapter 2 is. In chapter 2 of 1 Samuel, named after your boy, you sang a song. Really, it was a prayer. And you glorified God. And we think you'd be weeping and wailing, but were you? No. You're just glorifying God because He did what He said He'd do, and you did what you said you'd do, and He's blessing your life. And you're singing this prayer, just praising God for who He is, and you call Him your God. You had a personal relationship with God Almighty. And you warn us in that prayer, don't get cocky, don't be proud. What'd you tell us? Yeah. Those that lose wars going to win them. Those that were hungry going to be fed, and those that had everything not going to have nothing. Those that didn't ever have a baby going to have babies, and those that were cocky about their babies aren't going to have nothing to brag about anymore. You're going to lift up those that don't have. You're going to lift up those that are oppressed, and you're going to receive glory forever. That's what you said. You said, God's going to thunder from heaven, and we'll make things happen. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was your point, wasn't it? God turns fortune around. God has a way of just turning things around. When you think it can't be turned around, He does it, doesn't He? And you're, what? Oh, okay, I need to tell everybody. Your joy wasn't really in having a kid. Your joy was in the fact that God heard you. That's what was so impressive, is God heard you and listened to you and fulfilled your wishes. And that's what's so great for us today, is God hears us. And that's what the cross says. When Jesus died on that cross, He was saying, I hear you. I hear all of you. I see you. What a blessing. And He turned our fortune around. Oh, Hanna. God took you, a woman that was infertile, and He brought a prophet into the world. Wow. Hanna, you left your mark on history. Because by your faith, you brought a judge, the last judge of Israel, and a prophet, and a priest, and a warrior, all in one package. You did all of that. You brought that because of your faith in God, and you again gave that warrior and prophet and priest. You gave that person to God, and he was a man of tremendous faith, and he led Israel, and he did wonderful, incredible things. Your boy is going to anoint King David. That's what he did, didn't he? Hanna, you're too graceful to admit this, aren't you? We know where he got his faith. He got it from you. Oh, Elkanah was a good dad, but he got that from you. Did you hear us, Hanna, singing Faith of Our Mothers? Half of us in here wouldn't have any faith if it wasn't for our mama. Half of us would have never been drug into church and drug out by the ear if it weren't for Mama, Hanna. Hanna, at a time when Israel was destitute, they were in trouble. They'd lost their soul. Out of all the hundred thousands of women, he saw you. And he took a barren woman and he brought a great leader. He worked a miracle through you, Hanna. Because that's what God does. God takes things you think are useless and makes them useful. God takes people who thinks they're worthless and he makes them worthwhile. That's what he does. And that's why we love you and what God did with you and the kind of mother you were. What? What'd you ask me? Oh. How long am I going to be talking about grace? Forever, Hanna. Because you see, Hanna, I'm pretty convinced that's all there is. So I'm going to talk about it. One more question before I go. I'm into etymology. That's a big word. All it means is I like to know the origin of words. I like to know where words come from. I like to know stuff. Hanna, I got one question before I leave you alone. In Hebrew, what does Hanna mean? Oh, grace.
Let's give all of our moms a hand again. Eric Ann always loved her Mother's Day flower especially. And she would always say, Ray, you would forget it. And that was right. I did forget it a few times. But not Eric. She would fight and say, hey, Eric never forgets that. And you moms know, I don't know how many years you've been here to hear great sermons by Eric, but he never forgets you moms and the flowers for this special day. My mother was the greatest influence on my life and the closest person to me. And Mom didn't have much, and she was just a teenager that got married to another teenager. But she was an incredible mother and an incredible influence to me. At age 6, when I started going to church with them, we all went together for the first time. Starting that very first night, Mom, as an only child, would have me do the devotional every night. That continued until I graduated from high school. Every night at our house, we had a devotional, and I led that devotional. That was because of my mom. And then one of the tougher things was beginning my freshman year, Mom came down with cancer. And for the next many years, we traveled all over this state, from MD Anderson, Dallas, Amarillo, Lubbock, everywhere, getting cancer treatment. We and the congregation, we pull many, many, many bales of cotton to pay for this. That's another story within itself of just how people loved Mom and how she kept loving them. Her prayer each time was one prayer, that she would live until I graduated. Well, it happened. I graduated from high school. She was still alive. I graduated from Abilene Christian, and she was still alive. And then a short time later, I was asked to be the minister at the Broadway Church in Lubbock. That was the largest Church of Christ in the world. And to begin that service, they brought my mother down in the wheelchair, rolled her up front, and honored her at that service. A few weeks later, she died, but I will never forget her and what she meant to me. Father, Daddy, you knew that we were incomplete without Mom, and He gave us moms. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In Jesus, amen.